point that we'll be pulling up. But like everyone else, this was a strange year for the library with the pandemic. And so it tested us in some ways, but the library staff worked tirelessly to providing access for our public for not only our physical collection, but digital collections as well, and our services, printing and notary services as well, especially when our library building was physically closed. That was our first one. So we still got. All right, you can go to the next slide. So a lot of our services when the library closed was curbside appointments. So you can see our public took great advantage of that. We had over 13,000 curbside appointments. Staff physically took out to cars and people could pick up. One of the things I think is a silver lining to the pandemic is that people found our digital resources. And you can see the growth there just from fiscal year 17 to this year. Audiobooks at any time. Saw our circulation go up 25% from last year, and when I started on the library board, we would see the less than 5% of our total circulation. So it's really grown, and I think that that's great, and hopefully patrons. All right, the next slide shows you some of our new online resources added this year. We now have the New York Times online. We have Weiss Financial Ratings, which rate banks, insurance companies, stocks, and mutual funds. We have a program called Help Now, where students can connect with a live instructor for homework help. And we have Mango Language, which is an app and a web-based resource. I'm also the librarian at Summit Middle School. Help try to get. These are a couple other online resources we have available. We have LinkedIn Learning, which are video tutorials. We have Canopy, which is a service that we also have all the Johnston High School yearbook. Slide, it talks about, oh, we skipped, there we go. About our virtual make and take programs. When we move, have programs in the building, our staff was awesome. They figured out ways to get the programs outside of the library. So a lot of it moved to like Zoom, like the ESL classes, story times, book clubs, that sort of thing. We had over 5,500 kids, teens, and adult programs this year. And in addition to that virtual programming, we also created 7,666 that they were craft kits for adults. There were some poetry kits for teens, STEM kits for kids, night kits for families. Start in-person programming at the we are happy to report that our library hours are back now to our pre-pandemic. And we also have our meeting rooms open again, and half of the library board and the library staff.
Have any questions? thank you for everything you do for the library. I really love it. My kids love it and everything else. Question for you is that you're now back into the pre-pandemic kind of setup. Are you still going to continue the online programs that you already had?
I noticed like on the teen list, about half were in person and half were.
My question is basically, because the online thing is now very popular and everybody travel much and everything else. So I presume that that will continue on, and maybe a hybrid approach could be a good approach to make it happen for kids that can't come to the library, things like that. The second question I have is the ESL program. How effective is that online versus?
Online as it is in person, but.
And ESL is English as second language, so that's my concern is that people like to be. Thank you, appreciate it very much.
Other questions? Well, I'll just add my kudos to everything that you did. I accessed your resources.
Well, Eric did
You
a
were very creative in how you delivered services. So
Eric
thank
did a fantastic job because there was no, we did not have a handbook for the pandemic. So he
Y'all-
had to figure it out and he did an awesome job. Thank Eric as well.
Next item on the agenda is a presentation on creating a memorial. Yeah, because this is your first time in the building?
Is, well, in this part of it, wow. Okay, this is nice. Jim asked me how long this presentation is going to take. I said, I can talk for an hour, or I can sum up in about 5 minutes. Looks like I'm summing it up in about 5 minutes, so Cindy, go ahead.
But we can have more conversation later.
So a vision of this group is to create a public memorial that recognizes the relationship Johnston, Camp Dodge, World War I, Merle Hay, all of that kind of combined. Our mission is to design and erect a piece of public art that memorializes the relationship between Camp Dodge, the city of Johnston, and World War I. Ensuring the memorial is educational, accessible, respects the sacrifices of those it served. We are Johnston residents, Johnston's Lion Club, Gold Star Museum, Johnston Arts Council, and Johnston Historical Society. How it started. This is kind of an interesting story. Tom Leffler and I were on the 50th anniversary committee together. And one of the questions that came up was road, and there used to be a boulder out by where where it was, what it was, and how we made it. Several conversations and discussions. Right now, slide. Yeah, right now that memorial is at the cemetery across the street in Merle Hay Cemetery. There's some other, the Ding Darling cartoon is very famous. There it is. The memorial itself was was dedicated in 1921 by a VFW. Moved it in 2007 because they were widening the road. There wasn't getting much traffic, and there's the commercial. They moved it across the road over to the cemetery, which, as I was doing some research on this, kind of created some legal issues because the VFW moved proper authorizations to move it. So it was sitting there. So to move that boulder anywhere else, money invested, pride invested, laws that were on the books now, might be something a little bit more difficult to do than what we had hoped for. So on July 15th, we met at the Lions Club. There was representatives of the Legion Post, the Gold Star Museum, myself, Tom was there. Tom said that he kind of was an overarching, he represented the Lions Club, he represented the Johnston Historical Society, he represented the Arts Council, so Tom was kind of all there. So all these different groups kind of rolled together. So then we had some decisions to make. Do we try and move the boulder? If W Post issues, cemetery invested financially, legally, the cost of doing all that, go ahead. Or do we create a new one? Do we go out? One of the ideas, I don't know if you know Mike Volk up at the Gold Star Museum, but the World War I, carried their gas masks on their chest. Soldier that Dennis created in Johnston. Or something more imaginative, which probably is where the Johnston Arts Council would come into my group. Talk with them about some ideas or some thoughts that they may or may not have. The where. I noticed that Google doesn't have the map up to date. Outlines. So the where, the Johnston Memorial, Johnston Commons, the Legion's got a monument there already. Is that something we wanted to add to, or do we want to have that draws more attention and gets maybe greater visitation than what that one out there might have? The Lions Club was discussed. Again, Google Earth doesn't have a good representation of the Lions Club down there. The Lions Club was discussed because it's got a yard that faces Merle Hay, and maybe we could incorporate a park or something like that along with the monument as well. Triangle Park, I originally called that Leffler Park, but Tom didn't think that was a good idea, so we'll go with Triangle Park. And then maybe here in the Johnston Town Center, there's been some discussion about being able to have access to it and have it quite often by as many people. And what's next is city involvement. Getting the city to help us out doing what we're trying to do, organize into a little bit more of a formal structure, and maybe even something profit organization trying to build on the memorial and have something that's make some decisions about where and what it's going to be, raise funds for it, get the community involved, and get it recognized in some of the that are out there. There's a few already out there for World War I, and we get some federal recognition on something like that. And there's the tie-in with Camp Dodge. What we're asking is city involvement. Time to help us figure out what's next and where we want to go. A lot of different ideas that we sat, all that roped into one good solid plan, and moving forward with that is something that we'd like, because that also helps us with getting a location and maybe. So it's what started as a conversation between Tom Leffler and myself has turned into everything. I mean, World War I, Merle Hay Road would not have run out to Camp Dodge like it did without it. So, and then couldn't, very possibly you rode the train in. Or actually from you is consider helping us out with this.
I don't know if anybody else up here is having conversations with you, but I certainly am. Had some ideas that I'd like to share just in terms of recognition of our military. Might work well with what you're.
Yeah, I'd like to see us, we've talked a little bit about some streetscaping. I think there's several kind of, you have Merle Hay, you have Camp Dodge's role, especially in World War I, which is really hasn't been anywhere that I'm really aware of. But I mean, I think you could figure out a way to do stops along Merle Hay. Fun, but also in I think it would be really older to me is it's a rock. Other than the historical
Right,
significance.
and that was part of the discussion that we had as well.
Some other way, who was Merle Hay? And the fact, I always thought it was really kind of interesting that somebody who didn't grow up in Des Moines. Iowa, but he was one of the first, I think he was one of the first Americans to die.
There were 3. It was a trench raid out near.
So I think you're on the right track, and I think it'd be good.
Slide said more imaginative minds than ours, because we realized that we just don't have that kind of imagination in the group.
Excellent idea, I like it.
Okay, we have finished all